Non-Americans, what are your rednecks like? Stick around till the end to find out what rednecks are like around the world. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe for more fun stories. Story 1. When I moved to Australia, I thought that the local rarities would be similar to ours. It turned out that bogans are something special. My neighbor Steve starts his old Commodore every morning with a sticker that says, "If you don't like it, leave," and yells, "Fucking stray," at anyone who looks at it the wrong way. The funny thing is that he's always complaining about everything un-Australian, but when he met my immigrant friend, he immediately said, "Good guy." The Bogans love car racing, beer, and racism, but unlike our people, they don't care about Jesus at all. Only beer and Southern Cross tattoos are sacred to them. Story 2. Yesterday at a festival in Brisbane, I saw a real miracle of nature. A bunch of ladies dancing some strange shuffle to loud music and shouting, "Ashe can't." It's the Australian version of our hooligans, only worse. While a regular bogan just drinks beer and talks about the good old days, the ladies are pure evil on two legs. I accidentally bumped into one on the train and immediately started rocking my license. I said that I couldn't give her a cigarette, and we almost got into a fight. The bogans are at least friendly if you know them, but these are just born to hate everything around them. Story 3. Watching the Australian news, I noticed an interesting thing. All the local experts in street interviews have the same way of speaking. Every second phrase is, "This is just shameful," or "This is un-Australian," and it doesn't matter what they are talking about, whether it's petrol prices or the Prime Minister's new hairstyle. The funniest thing is when they say un-Australian with an accent that even other Australians don't understand. These people appear on programs like Tonight Tonight and tell the whole country how to live while holding a bottle of beer. Story 4. A colleague of mine told me about Tasmanian scammers. They are like bogans, only on aggression steroids. He met one at the mall over the weekend yelling, "Get fucked, yous can't," at a cashier who refused to sell him another beer. These types drink 24/7, sell drugs, and are ready to fight for any reason. An ordinary bogan at least has some limits, but a scammer is a complete degradation. They live on social assistance and believe that the whole world owes them. In Tasmania, there are especially many of them. Apparently, isolation on the island does not do them any good. Story 5. The most absurd thing I've seen in Australia is the rich bogans from Western Australia. Just imagine. The same mule, the same unculturedness, the same prejudices, but instead of an old Holden, they have a brand new $80,000 pickup truck. Their daughters wear expensive clothes but behave like typical bogans, rude, arrogant, and vulgar. It's a paradox. Money from the mining industry has made them wealthy, but it hasn't changed their mentality. They still listen to the same music, drink the same beer, and hate the same people, but now they do it in comfort. Story 6. At work, a Swedish colleague told me about their raggers, the types who drive old American cars from the 60s and listen to rock and roll. I thought it was cute until I saw them in Stockholm during the Wheels Nats. Hundreds of men in jeans with Fonzie-like hairstyles driving the same route for hours. The locals explain that this is their version of our tractor parades, only with music from the 50s. The strangest thing is that they even talk like characters from Happy Days, even though they live in the 21st century. Story 7. During my vacation in Indonesia, I got acquainted with the concept of pre-man. These guys come from remote provinces, walk around in full swagger mode, and demand money for nothing. One of them approached me near the hotel, started waving his hands and shouting something about a tribute. When I showed him that I didn't understand, he started making gestures that he was hitting people. The hotel owner later explained that this is typical pre-man behavior. They came from the village and know nothing but intimidation. At least our Riddlers at least work. Story 8. A British friend showed me an episode of the Jeremy Kyle Show and said, "Here are our chavs." My God, what's going on there? People with no teeth are fighting over paternity tests and the host is humiliating them. The worst part is that they go there voluntarily. One episode was particularly memorable. A guy was accusing his wife of cheating on him while looking like he was living under a bridge. The commentator wrote correctly, "It is unclear how they reproduce at all. Apparently, alcohol works wonders." Story 9. A German exchange student told me a terrible thing. Skinheads with Nazi symbols are rare in their country. He showed me a photo of men wearing Lonsdale t-shirts and explained that these were coded Nazi messages. It turns out that if you put the jacket on over the top, you can only see NSDA, part of NSDAP. It's scary to think that there are places somewhere where local morons don't just drink beer and listen to country music, but march with torches. Suddenly, our Riddlers seem like quite normal people. Story 10. A Danish friend of mine joked that their Rednecks are Swedes who come to Copenhagen to get drunk. They say that the Swedes are such drunks that even the Danes are afraid of them. But then a Swedish friend said that for them, the Danes are farmers who speak in strange sounds and eat only sausages. And the Norwegian added that both countries for them are a village full of morons. The Scandinavian confrontation turned out to be funnier than our North-South wars in the U.S. Story 11. A Canadian from Alberta told me that they rarely work in oil fields and earn more than doctors. He said that you don't have to finish school, but you can earn $100,000 a year. The only problem is that they all drive huge pickup trucks and think it's normal. Crossing the border from Alberta, you can immediately see that every second car is a Ford F-150. The locals say they compensate for something, but with such salaries they can afford to compensate for anything. Story 12. The French chef described their bofos as their worst nightmare. They tune up old cars, put the loudest speakers in them, and drive around towns showing off their coolness. I showed them a video from YouTube. It's really horrible. A dude in sweatpants dancing next to a neon-lit Peugeot 205, and something similar to techno is playing from the speakers, only worse. He said that such types are found in every French village and everyone thinks they are rappers. Story 13. An Austrian student explained the difference between spans and ordinary people. Proles wear expensive but tasteless clothes, get stupid tattoos, and think that if you spend a lot of money on clothes, you automatically become cool. He showed me a photo from the club. A guy in a gold shirt with a chain as thick as a rope and a hairstyle filled with gel. It looks like a parody of a gangster from the 90s, but for him, it's the ultimate in style. Story 14. The Dutch programmer told us about Toki, their version of white trash. These people live in debt, but buy huge TVs and Blackberries. It turns out that it's still cool in Holland. The funniest thing is that they hate Turks, who are to them like Mexicans are to Americans, but they drink and smoke every day. They also try to talk about politics, even though they know nothing about it. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Story 15. A Belgian friend described a horrible practice of their marginalized types. They soak tampons in alcohol and stick them up their asses to get intoxicated faster. When I heard this, I thought he was joking, but it turns out that this is a real practice among young people who cannot afford normal alcohol. They also ride mopeds set up to make the most noise and listen to terrible music at full volume in public transportation, European culture in action. Story 16. A Mexican colleague explained that their nacos are not just poor people, but an entire subculture. Black people without education are now massively involved in the drug trade because there is no other way to make money. He said that this is a complex social problem, not just rare tequila shots, but the stereotype remains. Just as Americans think of Mexicans, Mexicans think of the mowing of the grass. It's a vicious circle of prejudice, only each country has its own victims. Story 17. A Chilean student showed me a video of the Vachituro, the anthem of the Flyers. It's something incredible. Guys with mules, caps on the side, dancing some strange dance to Argentine cumbia. It looks like a parody of Latin American culture, but for them it's serious. He said that the flights not only dance, but also rob people and beat them for no reason. Our raiders at least rarely attack random passers-by. Story 18. An Irishman from Belfast told us about the Millies and Scallies, the most colorful characters in Northern Ireland. Millies wear miniskirts in winter without jackets, with false eyelashes and tons of makeup, and then go to church on Sunday. The Scullies wear sneakers without laces, have strange haircuts, and bring their Staffordshire Terriers with them without leashes. The most absurd thing is that they are all very religious Catholics, but they drink, swear, and fight all the time. Story 19. A Polish construction worker told me about their dress. Guys in tracksuits who sit outside shops and pretend to be very busy. They wear fake Adidas, drink cheap beer, and discuss football as if the fate of the world depends on it. He said that after joining the EU, many of them went to work in England, but the mentality remained the same. Nowadays, the dresses are international. You can meet them in London, Berlin, or Amsterdam. Story 20. A Finnish programmer explained that in Finland, rednecks are just drunks who sit in a sauna and hate Russian tourists. Not very diverse, but effective. He said that the Finnish version of racism is when they start speaking Swedish to show their cultural superiority. The funny thing is that even Finnish homeless people speak 3 languages, so it's hard to call them real riffraff in the American sense of the word. Story 21. During my exchange in Stockholm, I lived next to a weirdo who polished some ancient American car from the 60s every weekend. It turned out that he was a raggar, a Swede who cosplayed as Fonzie from Happy Days. Jeans, a leather jacket, briolet hair, the whole package. Every August, these types come to the capital and spend the whole day circling the same route to rock and roll. Locals hate them, tourists love them. A living museum of American pop culture in the middle of Sweden is surreal. Story 22. I got a job in an international company and heard horrible stories from an Indonesian about pre-man. These guys come from the outback with their swagger mode on and just demand tribute from passers-by. He showed me a video of some guy waving his arms and shouting for money. He says they are the most dangerous because they came with nothing and are ready to do anything for profit. Now, I understand why swagger full mode on as a Facebook status sounds so threatening to the locals. Story 23. I accidentally came across the British show Jeremy Kyle and couldn't tear myself away from the screen. Toothless people find out who the father of a child is through DNA tests, and the host also publicly humiliates them. The strangest thing is that they go there voluntarily. One episode was particularly striking. A man accused his wife of cheating on him, looking as if he had been living under a bridge for 5 years. Seriously, how do these people even find partners to start a family? Story 24. An exchange student showed me pictures of German skinheads wearing Lonsdale t-shirts. He explained a terrible thing. Under the jacket, you can see only NSDA, a part of the Nazi Party. These assholes wear clothes with hidden symbols on purpose and march through cities. It's terrifying to realize that somewhere, local fools don't just drink beer, but really believe in racial superiority and act accordingly. American rednecks suddenly seem like completely safe guys. Story 25. I lived in a dorm with guys from Scandinavia and watched epic battles. A Dane said that the Swedes were drunken savages who spoiled Copenhagen. The Swede replied that the Danes speak in unintelligible sounds and eat only sausages. The Norwegian laughed at both of them, calling them hillbillies. It seems like the whole of Scandinavia is playing Who's the Biggest Idiot, and everyone is winning this competition at the same time. Story 26. I went to visit a friend in Alberta and was surprised to see half of the cars on the road were pickup trucks. It turned out that oil workers without a degree earn more than surgeons. Imagine this, a guy goes to the oil rig right out of high school and a year later buys a Ford for $60,000. The result is an army of rich ignoramuses who compensate for their lack of brains with the size of their exhaust pipes. Oil has made them rich, but it hasn't made them smarter. Story 27. I watched a French Boffo video and almost went deaf with horror. An old Peugeot with neon lights, speakers the size of a refrigerator, and a guy in trainers dancing something between a break and an epileptic seizure. The music sounds like a computer dying to techno beats. France exports cheese and wine, but for some reason hides these monsters of auto-tuning from the world. Story 28. Austria surprised me with the concept of spans, guys in gold shirts with chains like a rapper. They work for minimum wage on construction sites, but spend all their money on expensive clothes and clubs. One of my friends showed me a photo from his club. The guy looks like a parody of a mafia guy from the 90s, but it's his serious look. The Austrian dream is to appear rich while having empty pockets. Story 29. Programmers from Amsterdam talked about Toki, masters of living on credit. A huge TV, branded clothes, a BlackBerry, everything was bought on credit. At the same time, they drink all day, hate immigrants, and try to talk about politics, understanding it like a dog in math. The Dutch version of fake it till you make it has been taken to the point of absurdity. Story 30. The Belgians shocked us with a story about creative alcoholics. Not only do they ride mopeds tuned to the maximum noise, but they also invented a tampon method of rapid intoxication. When I first heard about it, I thought it was black humor. It turned out to be a real practice among those who cannot afford normal alcohol. European innovations are not always beneficial. Story 31. Working with a Mexican revealed the complexity of the term nacos. This is not a sombrero joke, but a real social tragedy. Poor people with no prospects go into the drug business because there is simply no other way. Stereotypes are mixed with real problems of racism and inequality. It's not as simple as Americans think with their memes about Mexicans. Story 32. A Chilean demonstrated flight taz through a video called Vachituro, guys with mules dancing to cumbia as seriously as if it were a ballet at the Bolshoi Theater. It looks like a parody of Latin culture, but for them it's real art. Worse, they not only dance but also rob people for fun. Musical tastes and crime go hand in hand. Story 33. Belfast introduced me to the Millies and Scally, the strangest creatures in Northern Ireland. Girls wear miniskirts in winter without jackets, but with tons of makeup, and on Sunday they sit piously in church. The boys wear sneakers without laces and pull Staffordshire Terriers without leashes. The cocktail of religion, alcohol, and constant fighting is a classic Irish mix. Story 34. After Poland's accession to the EU, drag became a European phenomenon. Sportswear, fake Adidas, cheap beer, and talk about football as if it were a matter of life and death. Now I see them from London to Berlin, the globalization of subcultures in action. Poland exports not only workers but also philosophers from the backyard in tracksuits. Story 35. A Finnish IT engineer explained the simplicity of their Rednecks, functional alcoholics in a sauna who silently hate Russian tourists. When they want to show superiority, they switch to Swedish. Even local homeless people speak 3 languages, so you can't call them classic ignorant people. Finnish racism is a highly educated contempt for everyone else. Story 36. I stopped at a gas station somewhere in the hinterland of Sweden and saw a strange picture. A man in camouflage was refueling his snowmobile in July. I started a conversation and found out that he was a local hunter who lives on a farm in the forest and communicates mostly by sucking in air instead of saying yes. He demonstrated this sound. It sounds like a backwards whistle. He talked about hunting moose and complained that everything south of Falun is fjolträsk, a swamp for sissies. Northern Sweden has its own caste of forest bears in human form. Story 37. I got a summer job in France and met some local youth in a bar. One guy was bragging all night about his tuned car. It turned out to be a Citroën with stickers and red lights. The music was playing so loud that the glass was shaking. When I asked what style it was, he proudly replied, "French tuning, mon ami." Later, I found out that there are dozens of such boffins in every French town, and everyone thinks they are brilliant car designers. Story 38. The flight was delayed in Brussels, and I had to spend the night in a cheap hotel near the station. In the morning, I woke up to a terrible sound. Some moped was roaring as if it was dying in agony. I looked out the window and saw a guy in sweatpants driving around in circles and listening to the raps at full blast. The desk clerk explained that it was a marginal, the Belgian version of the chavs. He added with a smile that the most creative of them used tampons with alcohol for a faster effect. European innovations are sometimes frightening. Story 39. The student exchange took me to Vienna, where a local guy showed me a nightclub full of flyers. Gold shirts, chains like 80s rockers, hairstyles filled with gel. It looked like an army of clones from a music video. The funniest thing is that everyone works on the construction site for a pittance, but every weekend they spend a week's salary on one night in a club. Austrian philosophy: it's better to live like a king for a day than a man for a month. Story 40. I spent a week in Amsterdam with a programmer friend who was constantly complaining about his toky neighbors. These types live in social housing but have a 60-inch TV and wear fake Gucci. Everything was bought on credit, of course. In the evening, they drink outside the store and loudly discuss how they would run the country if given the power. The Dutch paradox: socialism has created a class of people who imitate capitalist success without having any money. Story 41. I went to a festival in Mexico and saw real nacos for the first time. Not funny characters from memes, but real people with real problems. Most of them are black, without education, and now many of them go into the drug business just to survive. A local explained that this is a complex social problem, not just Mexican riddles. Stereotypes are destroyed when you see the reality with your own eyes. Story 42. I was celebrating New Year's Eve in Santiago and came across a group of flights outside a club. Mules, caps on the side, dancing to Argentine cumbia. It looked like a parody of Latin culture. But when one of them began to aggressively approach girls, he realized that this was not just a strange subculture. The locals warned me that they could beat up a flights just for fun. Musical preferences and a penchant for violence often go hand in hand. Story 43. By chance, I found myself at a wedding in Belfast and saw real scallywags in action. Guys in sneakers without laces with strange haircuts leading Staffordshire Terriers right to the ceremony. Millies in mini dresses in winter with false eyelashes and tons of makeup, but always with crosses around their necks. Religion plus alcohol was constant readiness for a fight and a classic Northern Irish cocktail. Story 44. I worked in the summer on a construction site in London with Poles who always wore tracksuits even in the heat. In the evenings, they would sit outside a shop with cheap beer and discuss football as passionately as if the fate of the universe depended on it. One explained that it was a lifestyle of dress, to be always ready for sports, even if you never play them. After joining the EU, this subculture spread throughout Europe. Story 45. I got lost in Helsinki and asked a man near a sauna for help. It turned out that he spoke Finnish, Swedish, and English, but he was drinking all the time and hated Russian tourists. When he wants to offend someone, he defiantly switches to Swedish. He explained that this is a Finnish way of showing cultural superiority. Even the local alcoholics here are multilingual. It's hard to call them ignorant. Story 46. I was vacationing in a Turkish hotel next to Romanians who were listening to some strange music all the time. It turned out that it was manele, Turkish gypsy pop, which they consider to be the pinnacle of art. The guys arrived in old BMWs with gold teeth and talked about a wedding for 1,000 guests at home. Balkan glamour is when poverty is decorated with sparkles and loud music of dubious quality. Story 47. A night in a Bulgarian bar turned into a culture shock because of chalga, music that makes people dumber by the minute. The dances insult any aesthetic. The lyrics are exclusively about money and women. The bartender explained that Bulgaria exports this crap to Serbia, and they send turbo folk in return. Cultural exchange at the lowest level is a race to the bottom between neighboring countries. Story 48. A tour of northern Sweden showed strange farmers in green sweaters and caps tilted up. All related to each other, they organize a plowing championship behind their church every year. They drive old John Deere tractors and speak a dialect that even Stockholmers do not understand. Local aristocracy with mulch instead of crowns and fields instead of palaces. Story 49. A dorm neighbor from Hungary told me about the gypsies as a national phenomenon. Bright clothes, loud music, a nomadic lifestyle, and a complete rejection of taxes. At least they are more cheerful than our depressed alcoholics, he said philosophically. The Eastern European approach: if you can't change something, find the positive aspects of it and accept reality. Story 50. The summer school in Lithuania introduced me to the evolution of subcultures. The Soviet gopiniks wore Adidas and drank Chifir, while the modern ones wear fake Hugo Boss and energy drinks. The basic mentality has not changed, to show coolness without doing anything. Only the brands and drinks have changed. The essence remains the same. Progress sometimes means only updating the appearance while maintaining the old content. Story 51. The windows of my apartment in Rotterdam overlook social housing, where a circus takes place every night. The Toki neighbors have cinema-sized TVs and the latest Blackberries, all bought on credit. Gathering at the entrance with cheap beer, they talk loudly about how they would run the Netherlands if they were given the power. None of them has worked for more than a year in a row, but they are all experts in economics. They hate Turks for all the problems of the country, wear fake Gucci, and think they look like millionaires. Socialism has created people who imitate wealth with empty pockets. Story 52. Warsaw's shopping centers are an ideal place to observe dressers in nature. The benches at the entrances are occupied by guys in tracksuits who spend hours discussing football as passionately as if the fate of humanity depends on the outcome. Fake Adidas is worn as if it were the original straight from Germany. When tourists ask me who they are, I diplomatically answer, local youth with special hobbies. The EU has given them the opportunity to export their subculture to London and Berlin. Now the drills are international. Story 53. The club in Vienna resembled the set of a 90s mafia movie. Half of the visitors were spans in golden shirts with chains like sea ropes. Their hair was filled with gel so that it shone under the neon. Minimum wage construction workers turn into bosses every Saturday, spending a week's salary in one night. The dance floor is a theater where everyone copies Don Corleone, seriously considering themselves the embodiment of elegance. Austrians believe that a day as a king is better than a year as a commoner. Story 54. A McDonald's in a French town after sunset becomes a car show for boffins. Old Peugeots are glowing with neons, speakers take up half the interior, and music is pounding in the ears. The guys drive around the main street for hours, stopping to show off their tuning masterpieces to each other. The owner of the Red Lit 206 lectures on the true French style. The country of Bordeaux and Camembert is ashamed of these car designers. Story 55. 1,000 guests, Turkish gypsy music on the verge of pain, a groom with gold teeth. The Romanian wedding exceeded all expectations. A 20-year-old BMW parked like a throne, songs exclusively about money and available women. The owner proudly calls it Balkan glamour, the art of making a queen out of the poorest person with glitter and loudness. 2 busloads of relatives, gold jewelry everywhere, a celebration of poverty in a festive package. Story 56. Bulgarian bars are attacking patrons with chalga, a musical genre created specifically to dumb down the population. The lyrics are about cars, women, and cash. The dances are eye-popping, and the melodies resemble the agony of a computer. The owner talks about the cultural exchange of the Balkans. We export chala to the Serbs, and they send us turbo folk. A competition to see who can create the worst music on the planet. Story 57. Finnish saunas are inhabited by unique creatures, educated racist alcoholics. Every evening they sit with vodka, silently hating Russian tourists. The insult is inflicted by switching to Swedish to demonstrate cultural superiority. Homeless people here speak 3 languages and read the press. Racism in Finnish is intellectual contempt for the whole world. Story 58. A hotel in Turkey turned into hell because of the Romanian neighbors with their non-stop manel. They perceive the Turkish gypsy soundtrack as the highest form of art. Old BMWs from the junkyard, gold crowns instead of teeth, and incessant stories about weddings for 1,000 people. They describe in detail the rental of buses to deliver relatives. Poverty is beautifully packaged in sequins to an explosive soundtrack. Story 59. Resort Bulgaria holds tourists hostage to chalga. Every bar broadcasts this poison that instantly lowers IQ. The lyrics are more primitive than a washing machine manual. The dances insult the concept of aesthetics, and the sounds are like the death of electronics. The bartender confesses, we send this shit to the Serbs and get turbo folk in return. Cultural diplomacy at the bottom of the ocean. Story 60. Student life in Vienna has revealed the secrets of the flyers people who live the dream of a millionaire for one night. Gold shirts, chains as thick as a bicycle lock, tons of hair gel. Every Saturday, janitors and construction workers cosplay as mafiosi, collecting their salaries overnight. They copy gangsters from movies, confident in their own coolness. The philosophy of the poor is that a day as a boss is better than a year as a slave. Story 61. An international company in Amsterdam has become an observation post for Tokies, artists of credit life. Social housing with giant TV pseudo Gucci on their bodies, used BMWs, all in debt for decades to come. Near supermarkets with cheap beer, they solve state issues, blaming the Turks for all the troubles. The Dutch experiment. Socialism gave birth to imitators of success. Story 62. Mexico destroys Hollywood stereotypes about the slant. Instead of comic characters in sombreros, there are people with tragic fates. Dark skin, lack of education, drug trafficking as the only chance for survival. A local guide explains the harsh reality. Racial discrimination plus economic hell create this problem. Cartoons lie. There is a real social catastrophe here. Story 63, New Year's Eve. Santiago introduced us to the flaitas. Not a parody of Latin culture, but a real threat. Mules, caps on the side, ritual dances to cumbia. At first it seemed funny, but then one of them started hitting on the girls. Another threatened them for looking at them askew. Locals warn that they rob and beat for fun. Music and violence are an inseparable pair. Story 64. The wedding in Belfast became an expedition into the world of Scally and Millie, sneakers without laces, avant-garde haircuts, Staffordshire Terriers as accessories. Girls in mini dresses in the midst of the winter cold, pencil-length false eyelashes, but holy crosses are a must. The whole company drinks, swears, and is ready to fight for any reason, but spends Sundays in church, a cocktail of Catholicism, alcohol, and aggression. Story 65. A construction site in London has become an international exhibition of dress. Polish workers don't take off their sweatshirts even in the heat of the day, and in the evenings they philosophize about football over a beer at Tesco as if it were a matter of life and death. The credo, always ready for a workout, even if you don't play sports. EU enlargement has exported this subculture from Warsaw to the Thames, globalization in action. Story 66. It's a bitch. Yesterday at 3 in the morning, I woke up to sounds that you can only hear in hell. Some French boffo was driving around our neighborhood in his tuned Citroën with neon lights like a Christmas tree. The music sounded as if a computer was dying to techno beats, and the driver himself stopped at every traffic light and looked at passers-by coolly, waiting for admiration. The passers-by just covered their ears and ran away. In the morning, this genius of automotive design in sweatpants with a ton of gel on his head came up to me and proudly declared, "This is real French street racing, mon ami." I almost burst out laughing. The guy seriously considered his 2005 wreck to be the pinnacle of automotive art. Story 67, a Polish supermarket, a half-hour queue, and I'm listening to a philosophical discussion between three dresses about why Lewandowski is worse than Ronaldinho. They are wearing Adidas fake sportswear, beer in their hands, and look serious on their faces, as if they are discussing quantum physics. One of them pulls out his phone and shows the statistics and pronounces half of the terms incorrectly. The cashier whispers, "They sit here every day for 3 hours. They have one job, to be experts on all matters." When the queue is over, the philosophers move to a bench near the entrance to continue the debate. The EU has made it possible to export these thinkers in sweatshirts from Warsaw to London so that the whole of Europe can enjoy their wisdom. Story 68. What the hell? A Viennese taxi driver bragged all the way about his flying customers who cosplay as mafia every Saturday. Construction workers for minimum wage turn into Austrian bosses, blowing through a week's salary in one night. See the golden shirt? Yesterday he was mixing cement, today he's Al Capone. The most absurd thing is that they seriously copy the moves from The Godfather on the dance floor, considering it elegance. Chains as thick as a ship's rope, hairstyles filled with gel so that they glow under the neon. The Austrian dream is to live like a millionaire for at least one night, the driver summed up as he accepted the money. Story 69. The Amsterdam dormitory cost a pittance, but the price was in the neighbors, the Toki, who turned the yard into a theater of the absurd. Televisions like billboards, fake Gucci, secondhand BMWs all on credit for decades. They live in social housing, eat pasta, but every evening they solve the problems of the world near the garbage cans with cheap beer. Turks are to blame for everything. One talented speaker spent an hour explaining why the Netherlands should leave the EU while living on welfare from the same EU. When I asked him where he worked, he was offended and left. The Dutch paradox: socialism has created masters of imitating wealth. Story 70, my God, a Romanian wedding, 1,000 guests, Turkish gypsy music on the verge of painful shock, a groom with gold teeth near a BMW my age, songs exclusively about money and available ladies, dancing impossible to describe in human language. The host talks about Balkan glamour, the art of making a queen out of a beggar with glitter and decibels. 2 busloads of relatives, gold everywhere, and a volume like a rock concert. One uncle described in detail how he rented a vehicle to bring the whole village to the festival. Poverty in carnival costumes is Romania, baby. Story 71, a Bulgarian bar attacked me with chalga, a musical virus created to instantly dumb down the population. The lyrics are more primitive than an instruction manual for a kettle. The dances hurt your eyes. The sounds resemble the agony of an electronic device. The owner confesses with sadness, "We export this poison to the Serbs who send us turbo folk. We compete to see who can create the worst music on the planet." The cultural exchange of the Balkans is a race to the bottom, where all participants are both winners and losers to humanity as a whole. Story 72, my God, Finnish saunas. They are inhabited by unique creatures, educated racist alcoholics who speak 3 languages and hate everyone who is not Finnish. Every evening with vodka, they silently despise Russian tourists, elegantly switching to Swedish to insult them. Even the homeless here read the press in 3 languages. It's hard to call them ignorant. One explained the philosophy: we are not racist, we are just culturally superior to everyone else. Finnish racism is when you hate people, but you do it in a very intelligent and competent way. Story 73, the Turkish hotel turned into hell thanks to the Romanian neighbors and their non-stop manel. For them, this Turkish gypsy cacophony is the highest form of art, something on par with Beethoven or Mozart. Old BMWs from the car wrecking yard are parked like thrones, gold crowns instead of teeth shining in the sun. Continuous stories about weddings for 1,000 guests with detailed descriptions of the logistics of bus transportation of relatives. One even showed a video of dances that looked like ritual ceremonies of an unknown tribe, Balkan glamour in all its glory. Story 74, damn, resort Bulgaria is holding tourists hostage to music. Every bar is bombarded with chalga, a genre that instantly lowers the listener's IQ by 20 points. The lyrics about cars, women, and money are written by a 5-year-old child, the dances insult the concept of aesthetics, and the sounds are like the last gasps of dying machinery. A local bartender confesses, "We send this shit to the Serbs and get their turbo folk in return. Cultural diplomacy at the bottom of the Mariana Trench." The Balkans have turned music into a weapon of mass destruction of the mind. Story 75. Austrian student life has revealed the secrets of the flyers people who live the millionaire's dream exactly 1 Saturday a week. Gold shirts, chains like bicycle locks, tons of gel turn ordinary janitors into mafia bosses. Every Saturday they spend a week's salary in clubs, copying gangsters from the movies and considering themselves the epitome of cool. On the dance floor, they seriously reenact scenes from The Godfather. The philosophy of ordinary people is that it is better to live one day as a boss than a year as an ordinary worker. Story 76. An international company in Amsterdam has become an ideal observation point for the toki, the artists of credit life and masters of imitating success. Social housing is furnished with monster TVs, wardrobes are filled with pseudo-brands, and garages are filled with used BMWs. Everything is bought on credit for the next 20 years of life. Every evening near supermarkets with the cheapest beer, they decide the fate of the state, blaming Turkish immigrants for all their problems. Socialism has created a unique class of people, Professional imitators of wealth without money. Story 77. Mexico ruthlessly destroys all Hollywood stereotypes about cheerful nacos and sombreros with maracas. Instead of comic characters from cartoons, there are people with real tragedies. Dark skin automatically means no opportunities, no education, and drug trafficking is the only chance not to starve to death. The local guide bitterly explains the cruel truth. Racial discrimination plus economic disaster created this social problem. American comedies are lying. This is a real hell of inequality, not a tequila dance. Story 78. A New Year's Eve party in Santiago introduced us to the real flights, and it was not funny at all. Mules, caps on the side, ritual dances to Argentine cumbia at first seemed like a parody of Latin culture. But when one of them started aggressively hitting on girls, and the other threatened me for looking at me wrong, I realized that this was a dangerous subculture. Locals warn tourists that flights can rob or beat them just for fun, like a sport. In their world, musical tastes and a penchant for violence go hand in hand. Story 79. A wedding in Belfast turned into an anthropological expedition to the Scallion Millie tribes, the most colorful inhabitants of Northern Ireland. Guys in laceless sneakers with geometric haircuts brought their Staffordshire Terriers to the celebration without leashes, and the dogs walked freely between the tables. Girls in mini dresses in the middle of the winter cold, without jackets, with false eyelashes as long as pencils, but always with holy crosses around their necks. They drink whiskey all night, swear, and are ready to punch faces for any slanting look, but on Sunday morning they all piously go to church for service. Story 80. A London construction site has become an international exhibition of dress thanks to EU expansion. Polish workers do not take off their tracksuits even in 30-degree heat, explaining it by the philosophy of always ready to work out, although they do not play sports at all. In the evenings, they sit outside Tesco with cheap beer and spend hours discussing football matches as passionately as if the fate of all mankind depended on the outcome. One of them told me the credo of the dress is, "Sportswear is not clothing, it is a way of life." European integration has given the world the opportunity to enjoy this subculture from Warsaw to the Thames. Story 81. 3 o'clock in the morning. A knock on the ceiling. Again. The neighbor downstairs swears that elephants live upstairs. I went up to see 3 Dutch tokies are rehearsing speeches for their future career as prime minister. They had been unemployed for 2 years, but their political ambitions were cosmic. The most talented one spent a week preparing for a debate with his Turkish neighbor about migration. He studied statistics and prepared arguments. The Turk turned out to be a doctor with 2 degrees and speaks Dutch as a TV announcer. It doesn't matter, the main thing is principles. Our hero did not give up. Social assistants plus YouTube have created a generation of experts on everything but employment. Story 82. Mon copain, look at this miracle. A 25-year-old cashier shows off a Peugeot 206 with neon lights from the French boss's company. He plans to install a €2,000 audio system in a car worth $500. The logic is ironclad. 20 guys listen as if Einstein were explaining the theory of relativity. Music is the soul of a car, as our hero philosophizes, while the others nod reverently, minimum wage, maximum dreams of supercars. The Louvre and the Eiffel Tower are tourism, and the real France is hidden in the suburbs with tuned-up junk cars. Story 83. A shop near a Warsaw supermarket has turned into an academy of sciences. Professor Jacek, unemployed, is giving a lecture on why Messi could not play in the Polish league. Associate Professor Mariusz, also unemployed, objects with scientific arguments. The discussion lasted 3 hours. A notebook with tactical schemes for the national team, 5 beers for inspiration. If only the coaches would listen to me, sighs the strategist in the Adidas tracksuit dreamily. Poland gave the world Copernicus and Curie, and now it is raising a new generation of geniuses on the benches outside Żabka. Sighs the Baisti. Story 84. YouTube University has graduated another historian. A 20-year-old unemployed man from East Germany wearing a Lonsdale t-shirt, the letters NSDA under his jacket are a pure coincidence, tells the real story. Official textbooks are lying, the truth is only on forums. The facts are confusing, but the confidence is cosmic. He marches with torches, believing in his own racial superiority. The scary thing is not that such people exist, but that there are more of them. The internet has turned ignorance into a worldview with a pretense of scientificity. Story 85, the Scandinavian Cold War in a Danish hostel. Dane. The Swedes are barbarians spoiling our Copenhagen. Swede. Danes speak in strange sounds. Norwegian. You are all hillbillies compared to us. The Finn drinks in silence, muttering about Fultresk, a swamp for sissies. The most civilized region of the planet is fighting childish wars over accents. 1,000 years together, they still can't decide who is in charge. For centuries, they have been at odds with each other, but they have a united front against outsiders. Story 86. The Cold War unfolds in a Danish hostel between three Scandinavians. The Swedes are barbarians who spoil our beautiful Copenhagen with their drinking. Lars, a Dane, was indignant, waving a bottle of Carlsberg. Olaf, a Swede, responded with contempt. Danes can't talk at all. They have potatoes in their mouths instead of tongues. Norwegian Henrik laughed at both of them. You are all peasants compared to us, the oil kings. Finn Juhani drank vodka in silence in the corner, occasionally muttering something about Fjoltresk, a swamp for sissies. The most civilized region in the world is fighting childish arguments over accents. Living side by side for 1,000 years, they still can't decide who is in charge in the Northern Brotherhood. Story 87, Explosion. Turkish gypsy music is blasting through the eardrums in a Bucharest restaurant. The owner proudly spins the greatest hits of Manel. It's the soul of the Balkans, as he says. Guests wearing gold teeth dance dances that violate the laws of physics to songs about money and beauties. Taxi driver Vasile, driving a 2003 BMW, tells the epic saga of his niece's wedding. 3,000 guests, a rented football stadium, half the region celebrating. We brought everyone in buses, 20 cars, he boasts, showing a photo on his broken phone. The waiter pours the tsuika and explains philosophically, Manelli is to us what Beethoven is to the Germans' high art. Romania exports IT specialists to the world but keeps its soul in sparkles and decibels. Story 88. The temperature in the sauna is +80. The degree of alcohol in the blood is also +80. Finnish racist intellectuals sit with newspapers in 3 languages and quietly hate Russian tourists. When they want to offend someone, they elegantly switch to Swedish as a demonstration of cultural superiority. We're not racist, we're just genetically superior to other nations, explains Pavo. Quoting European statistics from memory, even the homeless here speak several languages and read economic reviews. Racism in Finnish is when you hate people in a very educated way with references to scientific studies and international quality of life rankings. Story 89, War of the Minds. The Bulgarian Shala has declared an all-out attack on human intelligence. Every bar, cafe, and restaurant broadcasts this musical poison, which instantly lowers the listener's IQ by 20 points. The lyrics about cars and chicks are written by a 5-year-old child with dyslexia. The dances insult any notion of aesthetics, and the sounds resemble the agony of a synthesizer under a skating rink. The bartender, Georgie, admits with sadness, we export this shit to the Serbs and they send us turbo folk in return, a cultural war at the bottom of the Mariana Trench. The Balkans are competing to see who can create the worst tune in human history. So far, the result is a draw. Both sides have reached the bottom and continue to dig deeper. Story 90. The end of the world came in a Bulgarian resort town when local bars declared an all-out war on the human mind with the help of chalga. This musical genre was created specifically to make listeners as stupid as possible in the shortest possible listening time. The primitive lyrics about expensive cars and available chicks are written by a 5-year-old child with developmental disabilities. The dances hurt the eyes and insult any notion of aesthetics, and the melodies resemble the last dying breaths of a dying synthesizer. Stoyan, the owner of a popular beach bar, admits with philosophical sadness, We export this music to our Serbian brothers, and they send us their turbo folk in return. It's a real race to the bottom. We're competing to see who can create the worst melody in the history of human civilization. So far, the result is a draw. Story 91, Austrian working Saturdays have been turned into theatrical performances about the mafia, where everyone dreams of becoming the main character. Golden satin shirts shining under the neon lights of clubs, chains as thick as ship anchors, tons of gel turn ordinary hair into sculptures. For one magical night, janitors, construction workers, and porters turn into Austrian mafia bosses, spending their weekly salaries in elite establishments. The dance floor becomes a stage where everyone diligently copies their favorite scenes from The Godfather and other gangster movies. Franz, an experienced janitor in a fake Versace suit, shares his philosophy of life. It is better to live one single day as a real emperor than to spend a whole year of existence as an ordinary slave. Mozart and Freud would weep at such a cultural heritage. Story 92, a social experiment in the Netherlands has created a unique class of people, tokies, professional masters of imitating wealth through bank loans. Social housing is furnished with TVs the size of billboards, wardrobes filled with fake brands from Turkish markets, and garages with used BMWs driven to the moon and back. Absolutely everything was bought on credit for the next 25 years of active life. Every evening near the Albert Heijn supermarket, with the cheapest beer in hand, they are going to decide the fate of the entire Dutch state, traditionally blaming Turkish immigrants for their own failures in life. Dirk tells a brilliant plan for the Netherlands' withdrawal from the European Union, while he himself has been living exclusively on social assistance from the same EU for 5 years. Story 93. Narcos destroyed my naive faith in Hollywood stereotypes about Mexico forever and irrevocably. Instead of cheerful mariachis and colorful sombreros with maracas, I saw real people with tragic fates and a complete lack of a bright future. Dark skin color in this country automatically dooms you to exclusion from society, lack of quality education, and drug trafficking is literally the only chance to earn a living and not die of hunger or poverty. Paco, a 25-year-old resident of the slums of Ciudad Juarez, explained the social reality. Here, the color of your skin determines your entire destiny from the day you are born. White Mexicans live in one world, we live in a completely different one. American movies show lies about dancing and tequila, but in reality there is a war for survival every day. Racial inequality has reached the level of the caste system. Story 94. At first, Chilean flights seemed like an innocent parody of Latin American culture, until the situation became serious. Mules' caps tilted at an unimaginable angle to the side, ritual dances to Argentine cumbia were performed with the religious seriousness of a sacred ceremony. The fun ended instantly when one of them began to aggressively hit on local girls on the street, and the other openly threatened me for looking at him wrong. The atmosphere of celebration changed to tension in a matter of seconds. Rodrigo, a local taxi driver, warned me seriously, "You don't mess around with flyers, man. They can rob, beat, or even kill just for fun and adrenaline. It's like a sport or a hobby for them." Musical preferences and a penchant for wanton violence make for an explosive mix. Story 95. The Northern Irish wedding was a real anthropological expedition to the mysterious world of the Scally and Millie tribes. Guys in sneakers with no laces with avant-garde geometric haircuts brought their beloved Staffordshire Terriers to the ceremony without leashes. The dogs walked freely between the festive tables, scaring children and the elderly. The girls came in mini dresses in the middle of the bitter Belfast cold, without jackets or sweaters, with false eyelashes as long as school pencils, but always with holy gold crosses around their necks. Throughout the long evening, this merry company drinks rivers of Irish whiskey, swears in the dirtiest language, and demonstrates its readiness to start a fight for any slanting look. But on Sunday morning, everyone piously goes to the Catholic Church for morning service. Story 96. London's international construction site has become a living exhibition of European dress, thanks to EU enlargement and free movement of labor. Even in the unbearable 30-degree heat, the Polish workers categorically refused to take off their tracksuits, explaining it by their sacred life philosophy of always being fully prepared for sports achievements, even though none of them has been involved in sports for more than a decade. In the evenings, the whole friendly group traditionally sits down at the local Tesco with cheap Polish beer and discusses football matches with scientific precision for hours with such incredible passion, as if the fate of all mankind really depends on the final outcome of the game. Zbigniew shared with me the sacred life credo of all suits. A tracksuit is not just clothes, brother, it's a philosophy and a way of life. Story 97. Sweden's Volo Vans have created a cult around a dead car brand and nostalgia for the past. Olaf, an unemployed 30-something from a provincial town, drives a 1995 Volvo exclusively and considers it the pinnacle of lifestyle and patriotism. His entire worldview philosophy is built on two pillars: a sincere hatred of immigrants and a romantic love for the Swedish car industry, which no longer exists. He dreams of marrying a girl 10 years younger who smokes around the clock and wears sweatpants as her only formal wear in all situations. First, we need to take care of the native Swedes and then think about some foreigners, he declared pathetically, finishing his fourth beer of the evening. Sweden exports progressive ideas to the world, but these guys are stuck in the last century. Story 98. Italian Tomorrow turned a supermarket cashiering job into preparation for a role in a gangster movie. Gold chains the size of bicycle locks hang on their chests. Tons of cosmetic gel turn ordinary hair into sculptural compositions, and tight jeans seem to be spray-painted directly on their legs. A must-have attribute is a BMW or Mercedes, purchased on credit for all subsequent incarnations of the soul. The most fascinating thing is to watch them copy the classic gestures from The Godfather with absolute seriousness during a casual conversation about yesterday's soccer match or today's weather. Antonio, an employee of a local supermarket, devoted an entire evening to explaining to me the sacred rules of honor and the unbreakable code of true manhood, while his maximum personal crime was parking his car in the wrong place. Story 99. The Spanish horteros have taken the imitation of Latin American style to the level of high art of parody. They dance reggaeton around their worn and scuffed seats with such religious seriousness and concentration as if they were performing a nationally important ballet at the Bolshoi Theater in front of the royal family. Mohawks on their heads, gilded chains around their necks, pants hanging so low on their hips that it seems as if the clothes are magically levitating. The saddest thing is that they are sincerely convinced that they are the embodiment of true Latin American cool and sexuality, although in reality they look like a badly made parody of a bad parody. Pablo, an ambitious 18-year-old artist from a working-class suburb of Madrid, showed me his unique dance skills and convincingly claimed that he would soon become a world-famous international rapper. Story 100. The Portuguese fishermen have created a perfect business model of hypocrisy and practical benefit. All day long, they complain loudly and emotionally to everyone around them about the damned barbarian tourists who allegedly completely destroyed the pristine beauty of their historic beaches with their uncultured interference. But every evening, with sincere smiles, they sell freshly caught fish to these same hated tourists for 3 times the price. Manuel, the owner of an old fishing boat, devoted 2 full hours to detailed stories about the blessed old days when there were no foreigners on the shore, and then, with a commercial twinkle in his eye, offered to organize an exclusive authentic fishing excursion for me for €100 per bow. We undoubtedly love our native land and want to preserve the ancient traditions, he emotionally declared, methodically counting the euros from tourists. Story 101. The Romanian wedding industry has turned poverty into the art of theatrical performance. 1,000 invited guests, Turkish gypsy music on the verge of painful shock for the hearing aid, a groom with a mouthful of gold crowns posing next to a BMW that is biologically 10 years older than he is. Throughout the endless evening, the orchestra plays songs exclusively about material wealth, expensive cars, and easily accessible women, and the guests perform dances that human language cannot adequately describe. Vasil, the bride's proud father and a successful owner of a village car service, spoke in detail about the huge logistical operation. We had to rent 20 buses of different sizes to bring all the relatives from all the surrounding villages and towns. It's a real celebration of our beautiful Balkan spirit. Uncle Georg showed the price list for the golden decorations. Story 102. Norway has created a unique social phenomenon. Oil money has allowed ordinary people to stay simple, but with a premium life. Einar, a professional hunter from the fabulous northern fjords, was showing off his brand new $30,000 snowmobile, on which he hunts red deer among the incredible natural scenery. We Norwegians don't need your vaunted education at all, because we have the largest oil fund in the world, he declared with undisguised pride, sipping an elite 20-year-old Scotch whiskey. At the same time, he is sincerely convinced that all people who have the misfortune to live south of Trondheim are weaklings completely spoiled by modern civilization, and he disdainfully calls Stockholm a stinking swamp for sissies and cowards. Norway is the only country I know of where being an uneducated peasant has become a privilege of the wealthy elite. Story 103. The Portuguese paradox was revealed on a beach in the Algarve. Local fishermen complain loudly all day about the damned tourists who allegedly ruin their beautiful beaches with their barbarism, but in the evening they are happy to sell fresh fish to these same tourists for triple the price and smile like Hollywood actors. Manuel, a 50-year-old boat owner, spent 2 hours telling me about the good old days when there were no foreigners here, and then offered to organize me an exclusive fishing excursion for €100. We love our land and want to preserve the traditions, he declared pathetically, counting the euros from tourists. The Portuguese want tourist money, but they don't want the changes that this money inevitably brings with it. Story 104. The Romanian wedding was a cultural shock of a global scale. Imagine this: 1,000 invited guests, Turkish gypsy music on the verge of painful shock to the ears, a groom with a mouthful of gold teeth standing next to a BMW that is 5 years older than him. All evening long, songs are played exclusively about money, expensive cars, and available women, and the guests dance dances that cannot be adequately described in civilized language. Vassal, the bride's father and the owner of a local car service, proudly told me about the logistical operation of bringing his relatives. We rented 20 buses to bring everyone from all the villages. This is a real celebration of the Balkan spirit. One uncle described in detail the costs of gold jewelry and decorations, poverty beautifully packaged in a festive wrapper with glitter. Story 105. Norwegian oil money has created a unique phenomenon of wealthy rarities who can afford to be uneducated and backward. Einar, a hunter from the northern fjords, boasted of his $30,000 snowmobile, on which he hunts wild reindeer in fabulous landscapes. We don't need education, we have an oil fund, he proudly declared, sipping an expensive Scotch whiskey. At the same time, he sincerely considers everyone who lives south of Trondheim to be weaklings spoiled by civilization, and calls Stockholm a swamp for sissies. Norway is the only country in the world where being a simpleton has become an elite privilege, because oil money can even afford elite ignorance overlooking the fjords. Story 106. The European construction site has turned into an international exhibition of dresses, thanks to EU enlargement and free movement of labor. The Polish guys categorically refused to take off their tracksuits even in the 30-degree heat, explaining it by the sacred philosophy of always being ready for sports achievements, even though none of them has been involved in sports for 10 years. In the evenings, the whole company sits down at Tesco with cheap beer and discusses football matches for hours with such passion and seriousness, as if the fate of all mankind really depends on the outcome. Marek, an experienced electrician from Krakow, told me the sacred credo of the dress-ups. A tracksuit is not just a piece of clothing, brother, it's a way of being in the world. The EU has enabled this unique subculture to spread from Warsaw to the Thames and beyond. Story 107. Something incredible is happening with young people in Sweden. I met some local Volvo-roggers, people who drive only old Volvos and consider it the ultimate lifestyle. Their whole philosophy revolves around their hatred of immigrants and their love for the long-dead Swedish car industry. Olaf, a 30-something unemployed man from a small town, spent the evening telling me about his plans to marry a girl 10 years younger who smokes around the clock and wears sweatpants as formal wear. "We have to take care of Swedes, not some foreigners," he declared pathetically, sipping his fourth beer. "Sweden exports IKEA and Volvo, but these patriots are left living in the last century with dreams of greatness that may never have been." Story 108. Jesus, what a hell. I found myself in an Italian bar in the middle of an invasion of Tamaros, local mafia cosplayers who work as cashiers and porters, gold chains the size of bicycle locks, tons of gel in their hair, tight jeans that look like they've been painted on their legs, and a BMW or Mercedes bought on credit for all their future lives. The funniest thing is watching them seriously copy gestures from The Godfather during a normal conversation about football or the weather. Antonio, a 27-year-old supermarket worker, spent the whole evening explaining to me the rules of honor and the code of manliness, while his maximum crime was parking in the wrong place. Italy gave the world Dante and Michelangelo, and now it is raising an army of pseudo-gangsters with dramatic gestures and empty wallets. Story 109. Spanish youth has hit rock bottom and continues to dig deeper. Orteros dance reggaeton near their worn seats with such seriousness as if it were a national ballet at the Bolshoi Theater. Mohawks on their heads, gold chains around their necks, pants hanging so low that it's a wonder they stay on their hips at all. The most pathetic thing is that they sincerely believe they are the embodiment of Latin American cool, even though they look like a parody of a parody. Pablo, an 18-year-old artist from the suburbs of Madrid, showed me his dancing skills and convinced me that he would soon become a world-famous rapper. Spain exported conquistadors to the New World. Now it is importing the worst elements of Latin culture back home through TikTok and Instagram. Story 110. The Portuguese paradox was revealed on a beach in the Algarve. Local fishermen complain loudly all day about the damn tourists who allegedly ruin their beautiful beaches with their barbarism, but in the evening they are happy to sell fresh fish to these same tourists for triple the price and smile like Hollywood actors. Manuel, a 50-year-old boat owner, spent 2 hours telling me about the good old days when there were no foreigners here, and then offered to organize me an exclusive fishing excursion for €100. "We love our land and want to preserve the traditions," he declared pathetically, counting the euros from tourists. The Portuguese want tourist money, but they don't want the changes that this money inevitably brings with it. Story 111. The Romanian wedding was a cultural shock of a global scale. Imagine this: 1,000 invited guests, Turkish gypsy music on the verge of painful shock to the ears, a groom with a mouthful of gold teeth standing next to a BMW that is 5 years older than him. All evening long, songs are played exclusively about money, expensive cars, and available women, and the guests dance dances that cannot be adequately described in civilized language. Vassal, the bride's father and the owner of a local car service, proudly told me about the logistical operation of bringing his relatives. "We rented 20 buses to bring everyone from all the villages. It's a real celebration of the Balkan spirit." One uncle described in detail the costs of gold jewelry and decorations, poverty beautifully packaged in a festive wrapper with glitter. Story 112. Norwegian oil money has created a unique phenomenon of wealthy rarities who can afford to be uneducated and backward. Einar, a hunter from the northern fjords, boasted of his $30,000 snowmobile, on which he hunts wild reindeer in fabulous landscapes. "We don't need education, we have an oil fund," he proudly declared, sipping an expensive Scotch whiskey. At the same time, he sincerely considers everyone who lives south of Trondheim to be weaklings spoiled by civilization and calls Stockholm a swamp for sissies. Norway is the only country in the world where being a simpleton has become a privilege of the elite, because oil money can even afford elite ignorance overlooking the fjords. Story 113. Hungarian gypsies were a discovery for me as the most fun version of European white trash, only with brighter clothes and much louder music. They constantly roam around the country in huge camps, collect and sell scrap metal, dance until the morning stars, and on principle do not pay any taxes to the state. Zolta, the 40-year-old matriarch of one camp, explained to me her philosophy of life. Why do we need your documents and laws? We live as our ancestors lived, freely and cheerfully. They really do look much happier and more cheerful than the local Hungarians who constantly complain about the economic crisis. Istvan, a Hungarian taxi driver, remarked philosophically, "At least they are more cheerful than our depressed alcoholics who only whine about their bad life." Story 114. Belgian marginalized people have taken their creativity in getting high to the level of scientific discovery. Not only do they ride mopeds that are specially tuned to make as much noise and buzz as possible, but they have also invented a revolutionary method of rapid intoxication through the use of alcohol-soaked tampons. When I first heard this story from a local pharmacist, I thought it was black humor or an urban legend. It turned out to be a very real practice among young people who cannot afford to buy enough normal alcohol for a party. Jean-Pierre, an 18-year-old innovator, explained the logic. The effect is faster and stronger and you need less money. European innovations do not always benefit humanity and progress. Story 115. The internet has turned German neo-Nazis into pseudo-intellectuals with scientific claims. Kevin, a 21-year-old unemployed man from East Germany, spent the whole evening educating me on the real history of World War II while confusing basic facts and dates. Lonsdale is wearing a t-shirt so that only the letters NSDA are visible under the jacket. Pure coincidence, he says with a smile. His entire education consists of YouTube videos and forums on the dark web. Official textbooks are written by winners, and you can only find the truth on your own, he said convincingly, looking like a great thinker and researcher. The worst thing is not that such people exist, but that the internet gives them a platform and a community of like-minded people around the world. Story 116. Finnish racism is the art of hating people in a very cultural and educated way, with references to statistics and scientific studies. Jukka, a 40-year-old programmer from Helsinki, spent the entire evening in the sauna explaining to me why Finns are genetically and culturally superior to all other nations on the planet. He quoted European education rankings, crime statistics, and economic indicators with a photographic memory. When he wanted to insult someone, he elegantly switched to Swedish, a demonstration of intellectual and cultural superiority. Even local homeless people are trilingual and regularly read economic reviews in the press. We're not racist in the American sense, we're just statistically better than others, he concluded, pouring vodka. Story 117. The Mexican trip finally destroyed all my stereotypes about cheerful nacos and sombreros with maracas in their hands. Instead of comic characters from Hollywood comedies, I saw people with real tragedies and no prospects for the future. Dark skin color in this country means automatic exclusion from most opportunities in society, lack of quality education, and drug trafficking becomes the only chance to earn bread and not die of hunger. Carlos, a local guide from Guadalajara, explained the social reality to me with pain in his voice. Racial discrimination plus economic disaster have created this hell. American movies lie about dancing with tequila. Here people are just fighting for survival every day. Skin color determines a person's fate from the first day of birth. Story 118. A Scandinavian hostel in Copenhagen became a battlefield between representatives of the happiest nations in the world. Lars, a Dane, convinced me that Swedes are uneducated barbarians who come to their capital